All right, guys. Well, I just want you to know that we were right next to these folks today. We went down to New Hope Church, and it was we had an East End meeting, and it was wonderful. And usually, it's actually in the East End Community Center, and so actually, East End was one of our first connections. They have so much wisdom. I think they've been in the community for like 30 years now. So they've been down there. They're our neighbor, and they have so many programs for the senior citizens, for the youth, for people who are in recovery, just all kinds of programs. So you know our motto is we don't want to compete with anyone or try to do something that somebody else is already doing well, right? And so we purposely met with these different community organizations and said, okay, what are you doing well? And then we're going to pick up the slack, right? And so a lot of the things that we decided to do was based on what other partners were doing, and especially East End Community Center, and sucking up their wisdom. Jan, who's the founder, correct?
Correct.
She is an awesome woman. She has so much knowledge. She is like the grant guru. And so I'm still pestering Karen, who works there, like, I want special time with Jan at some point. But anyway, so when we said we were going to have these trainings, East End was like, absolutely, we'll take 3 of them. They were just right on board, and they were supposed to be here a couple weeks ago and had an exposure, that silly COVID business. And then they're here today, and so they have so many things to share with us, so much knowledge and things that they've experienced that we haven't experienced yet and will experience. And then also the programs we can send people to, right? So we know that our resource managers, we're going to hope that when somebody has an issue that they have a list of resources to send to. But the more empowered you are and you meet someone on the street, even now before the Dream Center's open, a senior citizen needs help, a youth, a peer supporter, whatever they need, you can be like, hey, I know somebody who's doing that, and you can even contact East End. So that's our goal, that we're just sisters and brothers all working together. So this is Miss Wendy Berkshire, and she works at East End Community.
Oh, I got claps already. I haven't said a thing. Thank you.
She doesn't have to prove anything, does she? And Cheryl Griffin, and they're here, and they're just going to share all their knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, guys. Thank you.
And we're excited. I won't get ahead of myself, but we're excited because, as I mentioned to a couple already, the information and the knowledge that we hope to share with you tonight and train you on is across the board. It's not just specifically if you're working with people in poverty or people who have been in trauma, but hopefully some skills you'll learn tonight will be accessible for you also.
Yeah. So you know Wendy, or you were just introduced to Wendy. My name is Cheryl Griffin, and I actually met Wendy through this SRM class and the material we're going to present to you today, but I met her through that, and I actually work for Catholic Social Services of the Miami Valley. I don't know, I get one nod there. I was going to ask, I don't know if many, okay, somebody else. So we actually share a similar mission, I think, with your organization. We provide a pantry at our River Street location. We have a Passport Senior program at our Sydney location. We have a program for pregnant young ladies and teens who find themselves in a rough situation. So we have a program to support them. I think we're also well known for supporting refugees who come into the area. So we have a wide array of social services that we provide as well, and we hope that we can partner with you. We're located right downtown. I work at our Brown Street address, and I am the manager and one of the lead therapists in our counseling center too. So I'm really excited to be with you guys and to make these connections, and hopefully we can collaborate moving forward as well.
And as you know, my name's Wendy Berkshire, and I do work at East End Community Services. And as you can tell up there, I'm the Prevention Program Coordinator. And one of my big roles in that job, I work with children and families and prevention. And specifically, I'm the director of Camp Mariposa, which is a national camp. We are one of 15 locations in the country, and the camp is designed as a prevention camp for children who've been impacted by addiction in their lives. And so we started the program 4 years ago, the camp, and we grew and we were successful, and as you know, the need is great. And so we actually have 3 camps now. So we're the only location in the country that has 3 camps. So I go to camp a lot. And so it's a year-round program. And so the traditional camp is for 9 to 12-year-olds, and then we just started a program for 13 to 17-year-olds. So these children that come to Camp Mariposa have been impacted by addiction in various ways. So we have children whose parents are in recovery, and we're supporting them. We have children whose parents are not in recovery. We have a lot of children who are being raised by their grandparents and aunts and uncles because of addiction. And we, unfortunately, are gaining more children also who are in the foster care system. But it's a prevention camp, and so we're pouring. I think what drew me to do SRM and be trained in this program is I'm a big proponent of resiliency and growing resiliency in children, particularly ones who are often could be left behind or could be not noticed because of various things that are out of their control in their life. And so we pour education into them about drugs and alcohol, and we really want them to grow up and be their best selves. That's what we tell them all the time. And then we give them the opportunity for kids to just be kids. And also grow their self-regulation skills and their coping skills, which is really what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we know, or I'm going to assume, that all of you are here because you care about your community and you care about making a difference in your community. We all have the opportunity to make an impact on others. So quick little video. I don't know why it started without me.
About how much money you had.
There we go.
How much power you had.
Nope. Never said technology was my friend. Here we go.
When we're laying on our deathbed, you're not going to worry about how much money you had, how much power you had, how much prestige. You're going to see that that was all game, that was all an illusion. The only thing that's going to matter is the impact you had on other people's lives.
We are all on a separate journey. But the beautiful thing about our life here on this earth is at my funeral, they ain't going to talk about my success. They're going to talk about who Nick was and how Nick lived and how Nick loved and encouraged.
Success is incredibly important, but even more important than success, it's having an impact. It's knowing you haven't walked the planet in vain. It's knowing that because you've been here, you've blessed lives, you've developed people, and you have made the world a better place.
The effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. Everything you gain in life will rot and fall apart, and all that will be left of you is what was in your heart.
Life is a mirror, and life gives us not what we want. Life gives us who we are. When you were born, you cried while the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way that when you die, the world cries while you rejoice.
I've watched that I don't know how many times, and I get a little teary-eyed every time I watch it. I particularly like the, developing people. That's a calling. We all have a calling, and some of us do our calling in our work. Others of us do our calling in our volunteer work, and others do our calling just in our day-to-day experiences in touching others' lives. So thank you for being here and being willing to see the impact that you have to make on others that you're going to come across and for yourself.
So this social resilience model is a very adaptable model. We can come to a group like this and we can talk about social resilience and how you can put this to work in your community, in your new spot that you're going to go to. We could talk with this, I could talk with this one-on-one with somebody in a counseling session. You could take this to another country, to a non-English speaking group, and we can talk about this, even though we don't share the same language. And we'll explain why this model is so adaptable. But it's very powerful because, again, it focuses on the strength and the resilience and not the problem. We know that there's problems. That's why we're all here. But we're not going to make any movement forward unless we talk about the strengths and the resources we can bring to bear on that.
Make sure your mic is up.
Okay. The model was developed by Dr. Lori Leach. She has been a psychotherapist, clinical trainer, consultant for over 25 years. And in 2011, she co-founded and directs an international nonprofit organization called Threshold Global Works. And her passion was really to bring this language of strengths to everybody, to somebody on the street, to somebody in another country overcoming a natural disaster. So she did not want anybody to be excluded from this. She didn't want this to just be language for people who were in a therapy session, because that's not always accessible for people. So she co-founded this model that is designed to implement these capacity building skills to optimize resilience in individuals, teams. You could take this to a business and use this, and in systems. And so it's our hope that at the end of this, you'll take away some personal skills and also some skills for your work. It might be helpful to also tell you what social resilience is not in terms of its orientation. It doesn't ask why. Why is this person here? It doesn't focus on the past. You can take this person in the moment that you're seeing them. It's not analytical, so it's not based on a lot of asking them about theories and teaching. It's not about that. And it doesn't require clinical training. It's also, interestingly enough, not focused on feelings. And this makes it very different. It's very focused on your sensory experience and tuning in to what your body is telling you. Our senses and our body are the first language that we speak. Babies don't talk from 0 to 18 months. They're in a body and housed, enclosed in this system that has its own language. And it's our very first language. So it's universal. You can take a baby from Nairobi, you could take a baby from Panama, you can take a baby from the United States, and they're all speaking the same language. So it's really this body that we are housed in is universal in our first language. So it's grounded in, specifically we'll be talking about neuroscience and our universal biology and how to use this to connect with people and to build strength with each other. So our objectives, hopefully, is that you will recognize within the individual and within your community when you see bad things happening or what people might label as bad behaviors, you'll have a perspective that sees behind the bad behaviors to the trauma triggers that are actually going on in that person's life. You'll be able to, after today, we're going to have you practice some of the skills. We're going to practice them together, so you'll have a chance to engage in some of these resiliency skills. And then we'll explore at the end, we're going to explore, what your personal and community resilience looks like. What's your vision for your community that you're building here and in your I'm sorry, the name of his dream? The Dream Center, yes. So maybe some visioning about what you're hoping resiliency will be like in this Dream Center.
So I would invite you to do a grounding exercise with me. And when we went through our SRM training, it was impressed upon us, and I'm sitting because I'm going to ground with you. It was impressed upon us that for us to come out and teach others in the community about SRM and SRM skills, that it was something that we had to embrace ourselves first. And I'll be honest with you, I was pretty nervous to do grounding at the beginning, and now I just love it. And what I love about it is people's reactions and their willingness to be open to the experience. And so I'm going to invite you to join me in a short grounding exercise. And so the first thing I want to be sure is that everybody's feet are touching the floor, because that's part of our grounding. And we're all in these really nice seats. And so we have our backs, so that's really great. And the first thing I want to do is invite you to look around in this space and notice where you are, notice who you're sitting next to, notice what's around you. That is a sign. I love the greeting. I see some greetings. It's like Sunday morning, right? Sunday morning church. And so I invite you, you can do the rest of this grounding exercise with your eyes closed, or if you're more comfortable with your eyes open, just slightly gaze them down. You don't have to close your eyes if that's not what you're comfortable with. So now let all of your attention focus down on the support of the floor, supporting your feet. Really sense into that support with all of your attention. See what you notice inside as you do it. Notice your breath. Is it faster, slower, about the same? And notice your heart rate. Is it faster, slower, about the same? And notice any muscle tension. Is there more, less, about the same? Now just shift your attention to the support of the chair against your back. Really put all of your attention there. And as you do that, see what you notice inside. Again, notice your breath. Is it faster? Is it slower? Is it about the same? And notice your heart rate. Is it faster, slower, about the same? In any muscle tension, is there more? Is there less? About the same? And if, as you pay attention to that support against your back, you start to notice a distracting thought, a pain, or anything else, just shift your attention away from it to a place in your body that feels calm, and just stay there for a few moments. And starting at the tops of our head, we're going to sense calm coming down through our heads, our foreheads and our cheeks. Feel calm moving down through our necks and our shoulders, all the way down our arms to the tips of our fingers. Feel that sense of calm through your back and down through your seats, through your legs, traveling over your knees, down to your feet, all the way to the tips of your toes, finishing where we started with the support of the floor against our feet. And when you're ready, I invite you to come back into the space. And I think the group's not too big to ask the question. As Cheryl mentioned earlier, SRM is not about feelings. That's something we're kind of used to talking about, which is important. But this is really the beginning stages of connecting our nervous system, which Cheryl's going to talk about, with how our body is affected by stress. So did anybody notice anything during that grounding that they would be brave enough to share? Yes. Ooh. Raise. So you felt, I got to repeat it because I guess we're being video or audio taped, right? So when you were grounding your feet, she felt like her whole body was working together when her focusing on the tension to her feet. Huh. Did your heartbeat stay up, or did you feel like it stayed up? From the top down.
Was it uncomfortable? Was your heartbeat uncomfortable, or were you simply aware? Oh, there it is. Okay.
It was almost like if I was in a stress condition, a light stress.
Yeah, light stress. Ooh.
Handle this situation. That's the way it felt.
We didn't pay her. That just goes right into what we're going to talk about tonight. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for that clarifying question. Anybody else have anything they want to share? Yes, sir.
I was surprised I didn't fall asleep.
Was it so? It was calming for you?
Well, the reason I was surprised I didn't fall asleep is I used to, when I was stressed out before Jesus, I couldn't go to sleep because everything in the old brain was just running at 500,000 miles per second. I used a procedure similar to that to help me go to sleep. I'd start with my toes and say, they're going to sleep. My knees, they're going to sleep, et cetera, all the way. I never got past the heart.
Because you fell asleep by then.
Yeah,
Yep.
I fell asleep by
Yep.
the time I got to my heart.
That's a perfect example of grounding. So there's lots of different types of grounding. But what we're going to talk about tonight is the different skills and what we're paying attention to. So it's all about paying attention. And you summed it up beautifully with what you are paying attention to in your body. So thank you for sharing that.
So, just as you were talking about, becoming aware that you're triggered. So what does that look like? I mean, we might know what that looks like on a personal level, and we can explore that. But in your community, what that's going to look like is this might look like a trigger in the community. So you might see a rise in homelessness figures in your community, and you think, oh my gosh, this is so bad. What are we doing wrong? And it's not like we shouldn't think that way, but the other way to look at that is, how are we being triggered in our community? Because this is a symptom of triggering. Increased drug use in your community is a symptom that individuals in your community are triggered and lack the resources to be able to deal with their stress. Even speaking out, it's not triggered in a bad way, but when people believe they have to take their voice to the streets, that's a sign that a sense of justice and a sense of they feel exploited or they feel triggered that they have to go and take to the streets to be heard. An individual trigger looks like this as well. This individual is triggered by grief, triggered by loss. This individual may feel overwhelmed, triggered by personal circumstances. And this is, we've all seen this trigger in young kids. This child did not get what he wanted. But, and so we teach our kids resilience from a young age, giving them tolerable, stressful events, saying no to this, no to dessert before dinner. And they might have an upset about that, but then you calm them and they get through that, and then they learn how to be stronger. So with the other individuals pictured here, and when some of the other big community problems, these stressors, these triggers are bigger than their capacity to meet those challenges. And so that's where I think your community is going to come in and fill the gap.
So I'm not going to forward the slide yet because last time I did it, the video started. So I want to give you a little heads up on what the video is next. So I consider myself a bit of a bird nerd. I'm not a bird expert, but I consider myself a bit of a bird nerd because I really love watching behaviors and of course the nature and beauty of birds, but I really love to watch their behaviors and their patterns. And Cornell Ornithology Lab is one of the leading labs of bird knowledge. I don't know if any of you like feed birds or do any of that, or like to go to places where there's a lot, like walking through the hiking and all of that. But they used a Roboraptor, so they used a robotic owl to study the alarm call network among birds. And it's very complex, and I have experienced this in my backyard. So I'll tell you real quick. So I love to, like I said, feed birds and watch birds and listen to birds. And so I was sitting in my house one time and I heard blue jays. Have you ever heard a bunch of blue jays together? They're like loud and crazy, and I heard more than normal, and I'm like, something's going on in the backyard. And I don't live in a big backyard, but something's going on. So I went out there, and sure enough, there was a hawk, and they were doing, I want to show you this quick little video. This video will explain what they were doing. It's an alarm call in the wild.
We build special bodies that have robotic servos, little motors inside them with wires coming down, and then we've got little computers that we can program the head movements. It works really, really well, and the birds treat these Roboraptors as if they were real raptors. What we're looking at is how animals communicate with each other, especially about predators. We're using very sensitive microphones so we can record all of the very subtle alarm calls that the birds are giving. The reason we have this sort of snag, this curtain, is we could walk out in the woods and put this down and be fairly subtle about it. And when everything's back to normal, we can push a button and all of a sudden have a raptor appear. What we're finding is that there's this really, really complex interrelated network of many, many species all listening in and sharing information about danger. The function of this intense mobbing response with lots of birds coming in is to harass the predator, and its cover would be busted and it would be driven out of the area. If you think about it, it's really hard to be a hawk, because you're flying around and trying to find your dinner, and yet there's this bow wave of information that can go way faster than you can fly in some cases.
And so the reason, let's see if I can forward to the next one. The reason why I got so jazzed when I found that video and the connection of the nature and birds and how they communicate with one another and how they sense danger and alert others to safety is because that's what our brain does. That's what our brain does with our bodies, and Cheryl is going to tune into that for us.
So, I mean, just like nature has a complex and interrelated communication system, to let other people know, let other birds know that there's a danger, your central nervous system does that for you. So one of the first things that happens within your brain is that once there's danger that has been triggered, there's a little part of your brain called the amygdala, which is the alarm system that happens. And once it sends out danger that's happening in the brain, that information travels through the brain down to the peripheral nervous system. You have two different parts of your nervous system. You have what's called the sympathetic nervous system, which is the arousal system. That's the system that when danger is triggered, everything in your body gets prepared to fight or freeze. So your pupils dilate, your heart beats faster to pump blood into your body, like you were feeling your body, your heart pounding. Your muscles start to tense. Cortisol moves to, the adrenaline in your body moves and puts out cortisol in your body to increase its ability to amp up if it needs to amp up. And then you have your parasympathetic system, which is your calming system, which was, everything becomes calm and you feel like your respiration slows down and your heartbeat slows down and your muscles relax. So the thing that makes the difference is if the amygdala is in a new situation and it signals danger, but then it says, oh no, that's okay, I'm fine. Then your parasympathetic nervous system comes into play and it's like water, it just puts out that fire. And you can go back to calm and you can do the functions of the calming system. So your digestive system works much better in a calm situation. If you eat on an upset stomach, or you eat when you're angry, you know that your digestion works differently. You know when you get upset that you have digestive issues going on. So that's the cortisol working its way through your body. So when we're in a more relaxed state, we can do things like communicate with each other in a non-threatening way. We can calm ourselves down. We can think more clearly and rationally. When you're in an excited state, in a panic state, your whole perspective, your brain just narrows down into, I got to get safe. I got to make sure I'm safe. And until your brain registers that it's in a safe place, in a safe situation, it's not going to stop fighting. It's not going to stop running. It's not going to stop its panic mode. So when we're working with people, it's really important that we understand if they've been triggered. How do we start to move towards safety as soon as possible? Because we're not going to be able to engage them if they aren't feeling safe.
Mm-hmm. So we all have this zone. We all have a resiliency zone. We call it an R zone, an SRM, and it's your range of nervous system functioning. So when you're in the R zone, you have complete access to your thinking brain. I'll let you do that, thank you. And you're able to respond to things instead of react to things. So any given day, you are within your R zone. So you can see there's movement in the R zone. So you have things that are happy that happened to you. Maybe you had something slightly frustrating today. Maybe you saw a friend back there and you went back and gave them a hug. That would put you, a little bit up in the R zone. But then there's things that happen to us throughout our day or in our lifetime that are stressful and distressing and traumatic events or triggers, as Cheryl said. So that could be anything, and everybody's trigger is different, and we're going to talk about triggers in a little bit. So when you're triggered, then you are bumped out of your R zone. We get bumped out of our resiliency zone. And as you can imagine, our ability to respond is not great, and we're reacting more with that. And so sometimes people get bumped out of their resiliency zone and are stuck on the low, which is the hypoarousal, okay? And that could look like being depressed, being disconnected, exhausted, fatigued, maybe somebody that sleeps, a lot more than normally than their body would need. That could be the hypoarousal. And then the opposite is the hyperarousal, which is a little bit more what everybody thinks of, I think. Angry, raging, anxious, panicking. Those are all different types of ways that can be seen on that hyperarousal. And so everybody has a zone. I already mentioned that. Everybody has an R zone. And what I like to talk about with the R zone is that some of us have narrow zones, or some of us know of people with narrow zones. And then others of us have really wide zones. So if you can imagine, if you have a wide resiliency zone, then, no calling each other out back there. I saw a little bit of that going on right there. I know, I saw, he's like, no, his R zone, maybe not as wide as yours, I don't know. But I like to think of, or no, I don't like to think of it, but a lot of the children that I work with in Camp Mariposa, because of the trauma and the stress and the distress that they've been exposed to and are constantly exposed to, their resiliency zones are very narrow. And so if you can imagine, they get bumped out of their zone very easily. There's this one little boy who comes to camp, and if I don't call on him when he wants to be called on, or he doesn't get picked first for something, or just, things that those of us would think, that doesn't really matter. But to him, his R zone, his resiliency zone, is very narrow. And so one of the skills of what we do at camp is to help grow that zone. And that's the great news, is that if your R zone is narrow, it's the ability to grow it is there. It's having a growth mindset that a resiliency zone is the same way. We can grow our zone, and we're going to talk about how we do that.
Right. So in order to understand also what happens with our resilient zone is we also have two different types of memory. We have what we would describe as, I need to see this, our explicit memory. Now, explicit memory starts to develop after 18 months. And after 18 months, this is when children are starting to learn to talk. Now, when you're learning to talk, then you encode your memory with language, and it becomes kind of story-like. So you'll notice kids before this don't even know past, present, and future. They'll say yesterday, tomorrow, or, time is all mixed up with them. That's because developmentally, their memory isn't encoded in a linear past, present, future story form. So this part of your memory is things that you store with factual references and have time frames. It's autobiographical. It's where you develop your sense of self over time. And it's encoded to be able to be consciously retrieved. So this can be a very powerful tool in resilience, because you can use these stored memories that you can retrieve all the way back. Most of us don't remember. I would say most people can remember 4 or 5, a couple of memories from 4 or 5 on. But there are memories in there that are narrative stored memories that under processes like hypnosis and those things, people can recover some of those memories. But these are memories that we can use as tools to help people access, just like painful memories can be stored in this way. We can use these as tools for people to recover positive memories that they can use as resources. So this implicit memory that develops actually pre-birth. This actually starts, your implicit memory, your brain starts recording, the record button starts going on in utero. So I have met some people, very few people, that have some memories of being in the womb. Now that's not usual for us to be able to consciously recall them, but the record button is on. So it's part of our data, although we don't consciously retrieve it. This is pre-verbal. It develops before birth. There's no sense of time. It's, time is just ever present. You're totally in the present. It's based on your somatic and your sensory information. So sometimes we may have sensory cues And these may trigger memories, but they're not story memories. They're just like a smell memory or a thought memory. And they're kind of not pinned to anything in particular. They just kind of dangle out there. They're dependent on context and cues, so you may recall some aspects of them, but not other aspects. I kind of refer to it like dream time, like in your dreams. If you ever have a dream and you've recalled a dream in your life, you're like, and then it turned into this, and then it became this, and I don't know how this person became that person. That's kind of the mental state that this implicit memory is formed in, and it's fairly subconscious. So the thing about some of the people in your community that are triggered that you may be meeting is that if they have had negative impacts on their memory system, and they have had, many separations from relationships that are important to them, or have had, traumatic events occur in their lives, these are things that are embedded in their body, and their sensory system, I say, is just kind of part of the factory software that comes with them, and they don't have access to it. These are the people that you will see have the narrowest resilience zones. So when I'm working with people in counseling, if they're kind of triggered by the least thing, many of them do have these abusive incidences occurring in their early childhood experiences before the age of 3, because you can see they have no tolerance for stress. And this was something that, they were overburdened by a challenge that their systems were not capable of meeting. So, however, the good news is, because this is a good news model, the good news is that eventually they grow up. They do meet people. They do have positive experiences. They may be prone to interpreting everything as a negative experience, but if the attention is directed or redirected back to these, you say, has there ever been an adult in your life that was like a parent to you, that you felt totally accepted? And they'll say, yeah, there was this one person that I met at the Dream Center, and they tutored me, I failed this test 3 times, and they tutored me through that whole thing. And then you can have them freeze frame that experience and go and say, well, how, when you think about them, what does that do to your heart rate? What does that do to your breath? What is that? So you can use that. I'm stealing thunder here, so I'm moving ahead. But anyway, this is the important role that memory plays in how people are acting out their triggers. And it's really an important role for us to be able to play when we're triggered and we're in a situation.
Yeah, and as Cheryl said, so we all have sensory cues and triggers. And a lot of times when you hear those terms, you think negative. I don't know if anybody thought negative when they thought of trigger or a sensory cue. You're just ahead of the ball game, sir. Okay, so a sensory cue can be something that's a sight, a smell, a sound, a sensation, even a body position associated with a positive experience. So here's mine, and I want to hear a couple of yours. So when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time with my Nana, who is my mom's mom, so my grandma. And I have a lot of great memories of being there. And one of my sensory cues from that time growing up with her was her roses. So she grew roses. They were beautiful. I remember them being beautiful. And so I like the look of a rose, but it's the smell. Like I burn a candle at home that smells like roses because it brings me joy. The parasympathetic system in me, I just calm right down. So what about you? We don't have that big of a crowd. Who can think of something that's a sensory cue for you that's a positive experience? Way in the back. Sitting outside, freshly showered, in her pajamas, because you did that as a child? Beautiful example. So you're going to really enjoy our resourcing we're going to do in a minute. So, because it's about thinking about the smells and the sounds and the temperature and all that. Anybody else who has a positive?
Somebody had a hand up over here.
What?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, my favorite Christmas present was a pair of walkie-talkies. To this day, if I see a walkie-talkie or a little radio, it's a warming sensation.
Takes you back to that Christmas and that special gift that you got at Christmas. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. You had your hand up. Somebody did. Huh? The beach. I thought you said a peach, which could be. Yes, the beach. What about the beach? Is it everything about the beach or anything in particular about the beach? Yes. I relate to that. Can we go right now? I know, right? One more. Yes, sir. Two.
First of all, my grandmother had a fig tree in her backyard in Los Angeles. And every time I smelled fresh figs growing on the tree, not in the supermarket, but actually growing from the tree, there's Nana.
Oh,
And they're smiling at me as she goes out to pick some of those figs.
Nana and her figs. I love that.
One is my, this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
I walk out there and I smell that fresh air, and it just brings revelation to me. Like our pastor says, on trumpets, on atonement, he's out there in his sneakers doing rapture drills. Well, the same thing, when I smell the air, it's telling me that the harvest is definitely near.
Huh. This time of year and the harvest is near. I just want to be sure everybody in the back could hear that. And I have to tell you, I just chimed in with a sensory cue as you were talking that I wasn't aware of. But my middle daughter lives in Chicago, and they're all coming in tomorrow because my youngest daughter's getting married on Saturday. So, yeah, a lot of joy. But she said to me last Thursday, I said, I'm thinking about decorating for fall. I said this to the kids on our campfire, on our virtual campfire, and she goes, oh, Miss Wendy, I would really love to walk in the house and smell and see fall. And so obviously she has a sensory cue, and I'm here to tell you, the house is not decorated for fall, but I have the best fall candle ever because we all went to Bath & Body Works this last weekend. My three girls and I virtually went to Bath & Body Works, and we all bought fall candles. So obviously we have a positive, cue there with those smells. So thank you for bringing that up for me too. Anybody else want to get a chance to say before we go on? Thank you for your contribution. So of course, the opposite is true too. So sensory cues can be associated with a negative experience. As Cheryl said, we see that a lot in our communities. The bird is not for me. But my other grandmother, my paternal grandmother, I think must have had a very scary experience with a bird when she was little, which I wasn't aware of until I have this memory of being at the zoo with her, and it was probably finches or something that were around us, and she just lost it. She really, talk about going outside of her R zone. She did not go, and she went into the hyper arousal and really was like almost panic stricken by it. I'm not, saying I don't have negative cues, because I do. We all do, right? We all have negative triggers. One of mine recently, and I'd love to, if anybody's brave enough to share one of their negative cues. One of mine recently is, and I don't know when it started. I think it started at the beginning of the pandemic. All I can think of is that when everybody was staying home and there weren't very many people driving, and I was still going to work safely, but there weren't very many drivers out. And then everybody started coming back out, and I don't know if you experienced this, but at least in East Dayton, they're in a big hurry, and they like to ride on everybody's tail. And that has become a trigger for me. Like I get really irritated when somebody rides my bumper, or I'm like, I'm in the right lane. You can go around me. I'm trying to use all my SRM skills to keep myself calm so that I'm not, triggered out. But we all have those experiences and those negative triggers. And maybe driving, I see some heads nodding about driving. Any other negative cues or triggers anybody who's brave enough to share? Yes.
When I was a youngster, I actually saw a dead rat on the back about 15 miles. To this day,
I'm having a moment. A dead rat on its back.
I cannot stand. I mean, if someone has a pet rat, I will not go into his
Oh, yeah.
I will not even run across the house or a rat.
Yeah, I'm with ya. I'm triggered by mice too. I just got triggered while you were talking about it. But I'm okay. Well, thank you for being so honest with that. Anybody else? In the back. What is it? Whining. Like adults whining or children whining? Just anybody whining? So how do you react to that? If you were thinking about your R zone, how do you react to that? Thank you for sharing that, because I teach that with my mentors at camp. Sorry if I'm going off script here for a second, but we all have triggers. We all have triggers, and we really can help ourselves if we know what some of our triggers are. And sometimes we don't know it until it happens. And then that's, a learning curve for us. But my trigger with kids is disrespect. Like disrespect or bullying, zero tolerance. And I wasn't bullied as a child. I, didn't have that. But for some reason, that's a trigger of mine. And so I have to be aware of that when it's happening and remind myself it's not about me. I just have to constantly tell myself it's not about me. Any other negative yes, sir.
My son, when he told me the story later. When he was preschool, he saw a bug on someone's salad at a restaurant. And then for years, he wouldn't stay at the table if there was a salad at the table.
Yeah.
Interesting how you pair these events together, like bugs and salad. So salad means bugs could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Even though it was
Bugs in
just,
my food, bugs in the salad.
yeah.
Salad was it.
And if someone ordered a salad at a restaurant, he would have to get up and leave.
Wow. Does he still have an issue with salad and bugs? But he doesn't eat it.
Eat salad. Somebody else can eat the salad, but he's not going to eat the salad.
Yeah. Yes, Leah in the back.
I have a crazy example of a distant family. So maybe a great cousin or something. And when she was an adult, right, she would go into a hardware store, and every time she saw tiles, like tiles, ceramic tiles, she would put on the walls, the bathroom, or kitchen, or whatever, she would get really sick. And she couldn't figure this out forever, and she was talking to her mother about it one day. And her and her sister were like 3 and 4 years old, and they were playing with tiles when her sister got shot and killed. And it was an accidental old gun that little boys were playing with, and it was all an accident. She knew her sister had gotten killed her whole life. But she had no idea or memory that they were playing with tiles. So, like, I think about our grief center, people, adults, children, like, they might smell something that is
Yep.
so innocent, or hear something, or something happens so innocent and it triggers them, and they may not even know why they're triggered. We may never know why they're triggered.
So that's that power of that subconscious implicit memory making a connection between an external event. And it almost, the trauma, if it's a traumatic experience, it just kind of seals it. It kind of freeze frames it and kind of seals it, crystallizes it, and it just stays embedded, within your experience. And it's kind of operating there, and you don't even, like a virus, it's kind of operating in this background, and you don't even know it until a situation, external situation, triggers that.
Yeah, and Lee, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm, again, going off script slightly here, but I think it's really pertinent to what the work that you're going to be doing at the Dream Center, and any work really, is that Trauma 101, if you're working with it's particularly people or children that you know have gone through trauma, or you don't know what their trauma is, like what you just said, but their reaction is, way outside of the resiliency zone, like overreact kind of thing. What we've been trained to do is ask not what's the matter with them, but I wonder what happened to them. And, I'll be the first one to be transparent and say that is very easy for me to do with children, because I feel like children, have no control a lot of times in their situations and in their lives. It's harder, and it's something I have to work harder at to remember with adults. But when you're, working with people who have gone through trauma and stress and distress, that if you can change, reframe that question of like what's up with him? And I should say that to the person that's driving behind me, shouldn't I? But I'll work on that tomorrow. But to try and reframe that, what's up with them to, I wonder what happened to them. And you might find you have a different perspective. So I just want to mention that. Okay, so resiliency zone skills build a sense of safety in the body, because that's what we're talking about, is when we're triggered and we have cues that cause us to go outside of our zone and we feel unsafe, that fight, flight, or freeze that we're talking about. So the R zone skills, which are on your handout also, and we're going to practice one more. So grounding was the first R zone that we practiced, and that's paying attention to the support of something solid against the body. So I walked you through a grounding exercise, but you can do this when we teach the kids this. You can do this anywhere, anytime, and like that. Like, do you ever have to go into a hard meeting at work? Before you do that, and you're sitting in your chair, take those few seconds to really pay attention to the surfaces of where your body are, because that will help your parasympathetic nervous system be activated and calming, right?
Right, and even if you want to just, if you're with somebody and there's not, you could just, it's natural to offer a seat to someone who's in distress. Mm-hmm. And you can say, while you're sitting there, I can get you some water. You also, if it's okay, maybe you could just pay attention right now to that the floor is there. I'm here with you right now, and here's the floor. Just, make sure that you remember that your feet are resting against the floor. And really, this chair is supporting you right now. Mm-hmm. You don't have to do anything. It's doing all the work, and all you have to do is just rest into the seat and rest into this back, and I'm talking to you right now, and your feet are on the ground. And, it looks like your breath might be deepening a bit. Maybe you could just take some deep breaths with me here. And so that way you're using your relationship with them, and you're using these grounding principles that we used. And it's just right there in the moment. It's not therapy. You don't have to worry about messing with their heads or practicing without a license or anything like that. Mm-hmm. These are just really, these are things that you can do as one nervous system to the next nervous system. And you're actually using your calm nervous system to help regulate and move their nervous system into a more parasympathetic calm mode by the way that you are. So we are like tuning forks with each other. Mm-hmm. We can affect each other. You walk into a room and immediately you can tell if there's bad vibes there. And you can tell the effect of somebody that has a lot of good vibes that walks into a bad room and immediately can change the dynamic. You can tell the power of that experience. So.
And another grounding that, I don't know if any of you have heard this one, but it's used a lot with children, is tell me 5 things you see. Name 5 things you see. And then 4 things you hear. And 3 things you smell. 2 things you touch, and the one thing to taste is, kind of hard unless they have something in their mouth. But it takes their attention away from what the stressor is and helps them to ground and center themselves in their system you're talking about. So the next resiliency zone skill is resource and resource strengthening, which we're going to practice in a minute. And that is paying attention to what brings comfort, calm, or joy. And I won't say anything more about that till we practice it. And then the shift and stay is when there's something inside that causes a fear or a discomfort, and you shift your attention away from it to a resource. So my great example of that is I was at camp in August, and I think I mentioned some of our campers have very narrow resiliency zones, our zones, and this one little boy in particular has a very narrow zone, has been through a lot of trauma. And we were outside playing a team game, group building game, and he took a tumble. He just fell, and he just lost it. Like, he started screaming and crying, and it was just very dramatic and real, tears and everything. And so, others went over to him, and I went over to him, and we checked his knee, and there was no blood and all of that. And I said, dude, that was some roll you just did. And I go, where did you learn that? Because he tumbled and did the whole roll. I go, where did you learn that? And he immediately stopped crying. And he goes, oh, I take Taekwondo. And I go, you do? I go, well, that was really impressive. Your leader would be so. And he goes, yeah, I'm a brown belt working on my, whatever belt color he was working on. And I said, that is just so awesome. And I was sincere. I wasn't messing with him. I was doing that, shift and stay. Let's stay with, wow, that was an awesome roll, and where did you learn that? And it immediately got him back into his zone. So it's just, where are you paying attention? That's what it is. Okay, so do you want to say anything before we do the resource strengthening about the community?
Well, this you can practice on a personal level, but also think about the Dream Center and think about your community here, with some of the questions, and maybe visualize what will your community look like? What will the communication look like in this community that you're building? What will the environment be like? How will the lives of the people that you're working with, how will you be impacting those lives? And how will you tell that you're having an impact? So if you want to weave this into this narrative, then we can talk about maybe some of the ideas that you came up with.
So last skill, I invite you to, if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes, and if not, you can just cast your eyes down. And most of us have things in our lives that bring us a sense of joy, security, and calmness. They can be places in nature, people in your life now, or who were important to you in the past. A resource can be a favorite pet, a special hobby, a favorite place to go, or even a favorite food. So just let a resource come to mind now. You can choose any of those things that are important to you, or you can envision what you see a resilient community in the work that you're doing, what that might look like. And when you have it in mind, let it get stronger by noticing all the various details of that resource. Are there positive smells, sounds? Where are you when you enjoy this resource? Is there a season of the year, a temperature? The more sensory details you can bring to mind, the better. And see where you notice the sensations inside as you sense into all the details about that resource. Notice your breath. Is it deeper, shallower, about the same? And notice your heart rate. Is it faster, slower, about the same? And see if you notice any changes in muscle tension. Is it the same, more, less? And it's not unusual that when you sense into the body that you start to notice a distracting thought, a pain, or something else that's less positive. And if that happens, just shift your attention away from that and go back to your resource or a place in your body that feels calm, and just stay there for a few moments. And when you're ready, I invite you to come back into the space. It's kind of something you have to practice. Sometimes it's harder for people to think of a resource right away. You mentioned the beach. Was it calm? Did you go to the beach just now in your resource, or did you just go somewhere else? Anybody want to share what their resource was, or what was your resource? The fig trees? No. No?
I've always been in tune with nature, period, God's creation.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, it was another calming fragrance in the air, in the atmosphere. But this time it was spring.
Nature and spring.
It was the newness and renewing of life.
Mm.
Because I always took up when spring hit.
Yep.
I know it sounds opposite, but I'm a winter person. I don't like winter.
That's for a conversation later. How are you a winter person if you don't like winter?
Well, the type of person you are is usually explained in the type of season you don't like.
Oh.
So if you're a winter person, you don't like winter. If you're a spring person,
So spring was your resource you went to.
I finally got away from the snow and got to go outside.
There you go. Did anybody imagine what your community would look like, what a resilient community would look like that you have impacted and made a difference in? Anybody use that as a resource?
I really remember where the coffee shop that I spent in college, like almost every day. And it became family every time we'd go there. And we knew everybody, and there was one table that the family sat at. And if you'd been there often enough, you were allowed to sit at that table. And to have that kind of an atmosphere in the local community.
Community and connection and that kind of atmosphere. Thank you for sharing that.
One of the things that I was thinking of as well we were doing that is if you could connect, like if you had a personal resource, how would you bring that resource to this endeavor? You know, how would you bring this experience of a newly showered person, you know, sitting out and watching the evening at the end of the day? So how can you bring that experience to this community endeavor, and the smell of spring and the experience of spring and the excitement and newness of that, and the importance of your grandmother in your life and the mentoring and what she meant to you, and figs, and how can you bring figs into your community? How can you bring coffee as community? How can you bring peaceful renewal into your community? So if there's some way that your personal resource can also become a resource for this community that you're starting, and you could build ideas and ways to relate and ways to build connection with things that are within you that you already have as a resource.
I love all of that, and I tend to be a practical. Are we ready for the next slide? I tend to be practical, and so what you were sharing made me think of what I do with kids particularly, and I've done this with adults, but with kids particularly, when they are very distressed about someone that they love that they just lost. is, very emotional and difficult, and I can't take that pain away from them. But I can share it with them. And so I always ask, so tell me about your favorite time you spent with your Nana. Or tell me the things that you guys enjoyed doing together. And then they'll start talking, and then I'll ask a few more questions. And then they don't realize that we're doing resource strengthening with that. They're thinking about, oh, well, she always made chocolate chip cookies with us, and then we would do this, and then we'd sit out on the porch, and we'd, watch until the fireflies came out, and, all of that. And literally just did this with a camper recently, and she was still sad, that, it didn't take away that, but she wasn't in the distress that she was in, so. You ready?
Yep.
Bring it home.
So we're just commenting that this picture of Dayton is similar to this picture that you have here. So when we're talking, about a resilient community, when we were, earlier we had a slide that showed about, what does a community look like when it's triggered? So what do communities look like that are safe? What do communities look like that are empowered? What does a community look like when it's engaged? And what does it look like when it's connected? So as you're building your community in an intentional way, because you're doing this on purpose, you're not doing this by accident, you're putting a lot of effort, a lot of planning, a lot of training into doing this. So when you're doing this intentionally, you can keep in mind, how am I doing this in a way that incorporates safety, is an empowering place, and how do I communicate empowerment and that it's okay to be empowered, and engaged, I'm here with you. I'm connected. I'm sharing my experiences with you. So I'm really, really excited. This is our last slide. So
we're really excited. It's our last slide.
Yes, no, I'm not excited. I'm excited to have been with you and to have had, to have you share your experiences with us. And I'm really looking forward to all the great things you're going to be doing in your new space. Yeah.
So I know we have time for questions and answers, correct, Leah? And she's coming around, she's taking this microphone out of my hands. So, you are a wonderful group. Thank you for the privilege of being here with you and hopefully empowering you to the work that you all are doing now and in the future.
Please give them a round of applause. Weren't they awesome?
Oh, standing.
So much knowledge that we don't have and we're going to get, right? Does anybody have any questions? Oh, she was just zooming on to the other side.
Yeah, we thought she was coming right to the front.
Oh, no, I thought she was going to run to me.
My question is, when you were talking about when someone's triggered and you're trying to walk through calming them down, are you trying to identify what the trigger is to remove it, if that's something there, or you just are trying to calm?
Oh, here it is. Jeez, I thought you had it. You want to go first? I guess my first reaction is no. You're not trying to help them identify the trigger. I think because when they're triggered and somebody's in the amygdala, when they're in the fight, flight, or freeze part of their brain, for my campers who are not here, I call it the downstairs part of our brain. We aren't doing our best thinking and our clearest thinking. So when we're down there, we can't imagine what might be going on or what the trigger is. It's a matter of helping them, move from being triggered outside of their R zone to back inside their resiliency zone with some of these skills. Cheryl's going to add to that, I can tell.
Yes. Give me that microphone. Okay. So I think one of the things you can do when somebody's triggered is, they're confused. They don't know why they're triggered. So I know when I'm working with somebody who's triggered, I'm disoriented. And so I'm needing to know what, why, where. I'm needing all that background just because I've been thrown and I'm disoriented. So I have to maybe I just ground myself quickly by the chair and I just take a deep breath and I think we're here, we're now. I don't know, this person's upset. So I think the first thing to do is I can see that you're upset. I can see that something has upset you, and we don't have to know what that is right now. But I'm here with you, and I'm wondering if you'd like to have a seat, or if you want to just explore something with me, and if you don't, that's okay. But I'm here. I'm here for you, and I do see that you're upset. So you're establishing that connection, and you're acknowledging that they're upset, and you're giving them a choice, and so then you're becoming a more safe person in their world. So the other thing about SRM is that it's very invitational. We offer them, if you would like to do this, I would invite you to do this, but if you don't, that's okay. If this is your experience, maybe you have the experience, or you don't. You have a different experience. That's okay.
So I thought of another thing that just happened to me recently with an adult. I keep talking about camper stories, but with an adult who I've been friends with for years, and we are at camp together, and he got triggered by something that I would have never guessed would trigger him, and his reaction, unfortunately, outside of his R zone, was to kind of come at me, which was like nothing I would have ever expected from him. And I remember it was happening, and he was really angry, and this is a really calm guy. We're like just always like this. But there's always stuff going underneath, right, with people like this. And he just came at me, meaning yelling, like raising his voice, and accused me of something that was just like not okay. And I was getting triggered because I grew up with abuse in my family and my life, and so by a man, by my dad, and so I was getting triggered, and I'm just like, I did what Cheryl said, and I just kind of took a deep breath, and I said, I can see you're really upset, and I really want to hear what you have to say, but maybe we should, give it till after lunch, and we can revisit this and talk about it, and because I knew nothing good was going to happen in that moment. And it's interesting enough, it took him 2 days, because he's a processor, to go home and think about. He got triggered by this little boy who was having problems at camp, and we were trying to help this little boy, and he was triggered by a childhood friend who used to behave like that little boy and who didn't get treated fairly by the teachers. Yeah, I was privy to find that out later, so I knew what was a trigger for him and what we could do in the future if that happened. But in the moment, I wasn't going to know what it was. I just acknowledged what he was saying, and that I could tell he was really upset, and that we would, be sure to go back to this conversation. But right now, we probably wasn't going to be successful. So
the best way to use these skills is to practice them on yourself, and then to practice them with each other. And practice them in your family. I'm sure there's situations in our lives, in our personal lives, where people are getting triggered, and you can say, wow, I see that really upset you. Maybe we need to take some time and come back, or, I learned this funny thing in a workshop, and I'm not sure if it works, but if you're game, we can try it, and then you can just, yeah, I'm not sure it'll work, but, I'll sit here and we can do this together.
Also, one of the things that we learned in early childhood trauma, when some of us went to classes about that, was like when people are in that trauma brain, right, and they're freaking out, and they can't go to their logic whatsoever. The things that they said that they really needed was they needed to make sure they were loved and they were safe. And of course that applies to children, but really aren't we all like big grown children in a lot of ways emotionally? So just being present with somebody with their freaking out and knowing I'm still going to love you when you're done freaking out, and I'm going to make sure you're safe, and I'm not going to punch you for acting the way you're acting. You know what I mean? Like love and safe. And so we want our people to feel that way.
I always say loved, safe, and heard. A lot of people just need, everybody needs to be heard and seen.
I do have a question. We serve downtown on Saturdays, and we feed homeless people. We do have some mental patients. We have one gentleman in particular who, he disappears for weeks and then he comes back and he's got his own party going on in his head. I mean, he makes no sense when he's talking. We know that he has, because he lives on the street, that he has weapons. We've never had any problems with him, but should he get to that point where he truly goes over the edge, how are we supposed to handle that? I don't see how us.
No,
You
I
know,
think
I
I
mean-
think that sounds like
I think he's schizophrenic.
sure. So there's a lot of there's
Yes.
a lot of mental health and it's comorbidity with drug addiction and mental health. Do not intervene. That's what I was going to say. You just yeah, you need to just call the police because you can't use an SRM skill with
Right.
somebody who's
Right.
having a psychotic break or is dangerous. If you know he has weapons on him, then that's a whole other.
He's never been threatening to us, and I know from talking to him when he's lucid that he likes Marvel movies and characters. So when he was I was talking to him about
You started
the
talking
Hulk,
about Marvel.
the Hulk. Yeah, and he was going on and on and on. Now he was talking about the Hulk. But that's something that we're probably going to see at the Dream Center. So
Yeah, and you guys have to have really
Yeah.
good protocols for that.
yeah.
Well, and the other thing, when I went to meet with a man in Montgomery County by the name of Jim Vangrove, which apparently is really, really great, friends with the founder of the Easton Community Center, and he was talking about one of the things that happened in the East Side was, I don't know if he said the 60s or the 70s, when all of the mental institutions closed down, a huge amount of those people moved into the area where the Dream Center's at. So, which would totally make sense why it seems like it's so concentrated down there. And he's like, now you're looking at how many generations of one mental health, somebody with mental illness has children who has mental illness right? And even if they don't technically have mental illness, if you're raised by somebody who has mental illness, you're gonna have trauma, right? And so the trauma just rolls downhill. So that's what we're looking at, and that's what these people deal with every day.
Well, I'm going to say, we're located, one of our facilities is on Brown Street, and we have a guard there, but the guard is kind of trained in all of these de-escalation things. And so it's a level of safety for the staff, and it's a level of safety for the other people who come into the building, because we don't know where people are coming from. And I am not going to confront, I have a lot of experience in working with people with mental illnesses, but I'm not going to confront somebody who's seeming unstable and has that potential. It sounds like you've already started to develop a relationship enough that you read him well, and that you probably know if you start talking about the Hulk, that may just bring him right down, but I think there should be, you probably will develop these resources as you're developing the center. How do we increase safety for the volunteers and the people there? And it's good for people to have expectations. Okay, we don't have any kind of weapons come into this facility. We don't have, and I'm sure all of that will be part of the discussion and part of the protocols as you do that, and everybody will understand what safety looks like in your environment.
As a matter of fact, when we went to the East Side for the meeting today at New Hope Church, which is so very close to the Easton Community Center, so close. And so we ran into the East Side Community Police peoples that are there. They were sweet as could be, and I asked them lots and lots of questions. And part of their thing was they too want to make sure that it's safe and stuff, but then we don't want to ever make people feel as if they come in and we always have the police that's going to arrest them. You know what I mean? So it's always that fine balance. And so they gave me a lot of helpful hints, including setting up I don't remember what they called it. It's basically a police resting room at the Dream Center where they can come in, have a clean bathroom to go to the bathroom in while they're on patrol, come in, sit down, watch a movie or the TV for a half an hour, get some snacks for free, and it's them coming in and out of the Dream Center like we're a resting spot for them, so it increases their awareness of the Dream Center and wanting to be with us. And so now I got to figure out where to put one of those. I'm working on it though, y'all. I'm working on it. So, any other questions? All right. Well,
Did you figure out your zones back there? I'm just curious.
yeah, I was looking at him because we have one of our kiddos that gets very upset. So I was like, we need to try this calming technique.
No, I was just teasing you. It was just funny when you turned to him when I said that. Well, my youngest who's getting married Saturday doesn't always have the widest zone. And, she grew up with the other two who have pretty wide zones, but she's growing it. That's the real key is, she's 25, her full frontal brain is engaged now, and she's growing her zone, so. Whew, yep.
It's a testosterone zone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I just appreciate you guys coming. I appreciate the partnership. I appreciate all the training. We love you. We thank you so much for coming, and we just can't wait to learn more and more and more.
Thank you.
Well, does anybody have specific Dream Center questions while we're here? It'll keep me from answering. Huh? We're trying. Pastor has actually been going down there every single day with his work boots on. Every day. He's had enough, and so he's going down there. And Dennis, our maintenance, she's laughing because she knows. And Dennis Riley and his son Cameron, who actually work, here together, they've been going down there and doing work. So they're not playing around right now. So we're trying because we wanted to have Thanksgiving or Christmas. And it'll be a miracle if we get down there by Christmas. They happen every day.
Even for the Packers, baby. Even for the Packers.
Oh. She got you.
Hey, I'm a Packers fan, man. Aaron Rodgers was my guy on fantasy football for a couple years, but got Patrick Mahomes this year, so. Sorry, I just had to throw you wore that Packers shirt. I just had to say it.
Yes. All right, well, thanks you guys. Have a blessed night, and thank you for coming, and spread the word. Spread the word. Tell everyone you know the Dream Center is coming. And East End Community rocks.